Good afternoon, Patriots, and welcome to the 78th audio chat on the Q News Patriot Rumble Channel series. I'm the Q News Patriot, joined today by Sovereign Pastor Nick. My name is SG Anon. One of the coolest things about learning who we really are in this Great Awakening is learning the concept of status, both status in a social sense and how the dissolution of those divides is now beginning to be on display for the world, but status in a spiritual sense, a legal sense, a jurisdictional sense, who we are really before God and the regions of this world, and what does that actually mean? Pastor Nick actually stepped into this realm quite a long time ago. There's an interesting story between him and the now defunct corporation government of the United States, Inc., and I'm excited to bring that to everyone today. Pastor Nick, thank you for joining.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Good to talk to you, man.
Well, it was fantastic to get connected. The topic matter at hand is one that the audience is really trying to understand, learn about, educate themselves about: jurisdiction, administrative law, contract law, trusts. What is this thing called a susta KV or a questa KV trust? What is the difference between an all caps name and a name with a single capital letter and lowercase? Why is that significant? And as my understanding, you delved into this entire arena a very long time ago. Do you care to give us just a little bit of background on Pastor Nick and how this fight evolved?
I think my first brush with it was the when the market crashed. Well, that's funny. I've known there's been a giant global cabal running things since I was a kid because my parents in the 70s got a book called None Dare Call It Conspiracy. And so my dad had read that book, my mom and my dad, and then I was probably 9 or 10 years old, and they said, "Oh, read this book. Every kid should read this book." And it talked about how the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers controlled the banking, and banks controlled the
Remarkable.
war machine, and all this stuff. So I just assumed that everybody knew that when I was a kid in school, and I things would happen like I knew things politically, and if I brought something like that up, people or teacher, they look at me like I was completely insane, and I just assumed everybody knew all that stuff. So but even at that, when the market crashed, I was a real estate investor in Las Vegas from 1993 on, and when the market crashed in 2008 and my house went under and it went into foreclosure, I started doing some digging into the real foreclosure process, and the mortgage notes and all this kind of stuff, which led me to communities of people that were also fighting it, and attorneys and constitutional attorneys and scholars, and then it just helped me to hook up with people that were involved in attempting to make sense of the system here, and some people that really had good information. So I started to learn about it in that regard because we were attempting to find any way we could to save our homes. And so it was that first learning about the mortgages, and then I was introduced to people who knew this whole thing about the organic republic of the United States of America versus the United States, Inc. And so I didn't know much about that. And a gentleman kind of mentored me and a lot of people. I talked to you previously about this in our conversations about Tim Turner, who really started this whole movement of the Republic running parallel at the same time outside of the corporation. And so a lot of these people knew how to do the paperwork to work outside of the corporation. So the corporation, all the laws, everybody's dragged into this. From the time of your birth certificate, you are dragged into this and made actually, you are domiciled, they say, in Washington, D.C. by birth certificate. So when your parents fill out that birth certificate, and that goes in and gets filed in your local jurisdiction. Then they send that on to Washington, D.C. And this is what actually makes your kids a ward of the state. Essentially, you've just signed your child away as a ward of the state. And so you become a commercial entity from that point. From the point of birth, you become a commercial entity. And you, as a small little company or subcorporation or whatever you want to call it, your birth certificate becomes traded on global markets from that time. So a treasury account is set up in your name. And now this is what's interesting, because the actual United States of America still exists. And so when this treasury account is set up in your name, it's done both organically as you, the human sentient being, and it's done also corporately. But you never know that there's this natural, normal human side of it. And you don't realize that the corporation they've turned you in is not they make you think that's the human side of it. So this is why they're able to tax you. They can only tax businesses and corporations, and so that's why you talked about the all caps is your corporation. All corporations run in an all caps. That's generally the division, and that's really under the Uniform Commercial Code. And there's a reference to it somewhere in the United States Code, because at some point the United States Code brings in the commercial code, because we have to talk about trade and doing commerce. So they make you this instrument of commerce. Instead of a human being, you become an instrument of commerce, where everything in your daily activity is a contract. Everything you're doing when you're driving down the road and you see the speed limit, that's a contractual agreement. You agree to it by virtue of implied
No different
acceptance.
than how an internal corporate employee would be required to follow the posted signage.
Right, right. Virtually everything you do, a lot of times the implied contract, you have no idea that that they're making a contract with you, and that essentially you are just acquiescing to it because you don't understand it or know it. So so in the documents that I filled out and was mentored on actually becoming foreign to the corporate part, so that I could be on the private side of it. It talks about it. I mean, it kind of gets into what the difference is, and it even lists some of the UCC, the Uniform Commercial Code. So that's in commerce, which is really what controls most of your life, as opposed to the USC. But it also brings up how it relates to the United States Code. So the USC is the United States Code, which is the law under the actual Constitution. And then the UCC is the commercial law that governs all corporations and any entity trading or acting in commerce.
So it's not,
So, yeah, go ahead.
if I'm understanding, I just want to make sure that I'm clear on this. It's not incorrect to say that the UCC sort of functions as the foundational basis for maritime jurisdiction.
Yeah, yeah, because all the commerce originates, the main part of commerce originates with the shipping. So this is where the admiralty gets brought into it, and that's why the courtroom kind of looks like a ship, kind of a bridge of a ship, when you look at the little gateway, especially the federal court. That's all kind of based on this whole commercial admiralty thing. And it's so really navigating that in the court is it's so difficult, because if you make any kind of mistake, I mean, they can just run over you because you don't know what you're doing. And you have to get a good judge who's honest, which in this day and age, they're far and few between. So if you make any kind of mistake, they can just roll right over you, which they're doing now. Look at Trump. I mean, they just just put gag orders. Just now, all of a sudden, they're just taking the law into their own hands, essentially. without any care about it. But
Much
so
like
yeah,
piracy.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it is, because now this cabal has actually technically um, made an insurrection, and according to all the documents I've read, the laws and orders, all the stuff Derek Johnson talks about, I've read a lot of that stuff, and the Law of War manual. And according to all of that, and when we look at some of the things Trump has done to go back and take the gold back, and saying that they have all the evidence and all the information, and he's really playing that up lately too. He's really been stressing how they have everything. So I think that we are in the technical state of war. It looks like he um, created a state of emergency that's wartime. He's a wartime president. So from everything I've read and seen, that's all true. And it looks as though the United States corporation has been dissolved. And with the taking back of the gold, I don't see any way that they can try to fight to put us back into that. Especially now that we're with these FCOGs, the Federal Continuity of Government documents that are filed. Congress, any acts that they do right now are essentially on pause. So, people are really mad about some of the rhinos in Congress and saying, well, why aren't these people doing more and trying to do something? They have the numbers. Why aren't they defunding some of these agencies and like that? But everything they do right now is essentially, it's a non-issue, because it's a wartime. Our government has devolved into the smallest point of operations to keep the country going until this war is ended.
Incredible. And I want to get into that in just a moment. We have evidence that we've talked about, I think, on this program in days past regarding the Office of Military Settlements and how that was one of the very first things that occurred in the first year of the Trump administration, pointing to exactly what you just described and what others have very eloquently articulated. For the sake of understanding the historic context, first, I want to back up just a tiny bit. You said a moment ago something that I think is interesting and very important, and it was regarding the housing crash of 2008 and how you were seeking essentially clarity on navigating through that process and not being, quite frankly, taken to the cleaners by a fraudulent system. Was there a point during that process where you were forced to interact with, say, a big bank or a big financial institution in a maritime court sense? And how did that happen? I want the audience to understand how these things were done to us.
Right. So initially, I think it was Chase Bank started the foreclosure proceedings on me. So I was a real estate investor and a short sale negotiator, and I had spent a lot of time um, negotiating with bank loss prevention people, and so negotiating short sales. So I thought, well, I'll call up and see if I can work a deal with these people and negotiate with them and see if we can come up with something. So um, when I attempted to do that on my own property and negotiate with them, all they wanted to do was they would allow me to do a forbearance agreement, which is give me a lesser payment or no payment for a while, and then tack the payments and the extra interest on the end of the loan. And then if you can't come up with the catch up part, they'll have it at some point. They have you catch up like $10,000 or something, And if you can't do that, then they just go ahead and foreclose again. So I did buy myself some time, and then as I met with these groups, we started digging into the mortgage notes and how the whole uh, bank lending process itself works. And this is the thing that is an eye opener. And anybody can go and download this. I believe it's still available, and it's the guidelines for the Federal Reserve. It's called Modern Money Mechanics. And this lays out how money is created, how the Federal Reserve is able to create money. And one of the ways is through mortgage notes, and mortgage notes are money. So, and by virtue of your signature, and this is what a lot of people can't wrap their head. Of course, people can't wrap their head around our monetary, this currency, this fiat currency that we use anyway, because it's so counterintuitive to attempt to understand a debt-based system as opposed to something that has value, actual value. So a mortgage note becomes to the bank as soon as you sign it and they take it, they put it on deposit. And so what they do is they bundle them up, and and people heard about this, especially back in 2008, about how they bundle these notes together and they put them in a trust, but they're on deposit as money. So it's not just a promise to pay or whatever. It is actual cash in the face value with your signature on the bottom. Now, your signature on the bottom of that mortgage releases to the bank treasury credit in the amount of that face value. So that thing is as good as money sitting on deposit. They put what's called an allonge on your mortgage. And if you've ever requested a copy of your mortgage documents on any house you've ever gotten, you'll find this allonge, which is a deposit slip. So you're by virtue of you signing it, your debt was paid right then. And people are like, it just makes their head blow up. I try to tell some people that, and they're like, you're just trying to screw the bank. It's like, no.
So let me pause and make sure that I
Yeah.
understand this process here for the audience, because this is so crucially important. When you become a party to a mortgage document based on your signature, the bank files that document on deposit, but then the bank is immediately reimbursed for the money that it has shelled out on your behalf by a treasury account that is in your name. Therefore, the loan itself is sort of made whole, at least at the face value of the mortgage document. But then the bank continues to charge you for the mortgage money that has already been paid with interest for the grand majority of your lifetime. Is that
Right.
correct?
Yes, because you agreed to that. You agreed to that. And so even though it was through some trickery, actually, when they do go in and foreclose, it's only because of abandonment. It's only because you end up at some point abandoning it, even though they're putting all this pressure on you and you're going through all this legal rigmarole, or whatever each jurisdiction has to play out a foreclosure. The only true lawful way that they're taking your house is through your abandonment. Again, it's acquiescence. You're allowing them to take your house over. So the bigger part of this mortgage note thing is that they take it and put it. So if you have a mortgage for $100,000, face value says $100,000, and they have your signature, they take it, they put it on deposit. It now becomes a hard asset deposit reserve for the bank. And now they can lend out $1 million basically based on that $100,000 note with your name on it. So now they've just created $1 million in money off of the 100,000 that they created by your signature. Now they've created $1 million to lend, and then of course they lend and they get you know payments.
Reimbursement for each
Yeah,
land.
they get so money comes in on that, and then some of that goes hard and becomes a reserve, and then they lend out. But then when they bundle these notes together, so they take all of these notes, 100,000 here, 200,000 there, and they bundle it up and they put it in a trust called a REMIC. It's a real estate mortgage investment conduit. They put it in this REMIC, and then one of the banks will always be the trustee. It'd be like Citibank or something. And so what they do is they sell it on the open market. Like they get investors, I guess, based on the payments coming in. So they're able to somehow trade these real estate investment conduits on the world market, on the global market, and so a bunch of people, I guess, own shares of your mortgage note, basically. And then what we found out with my mortgage note is that one trust will have a number of tranches, which are different class levels, like different little components of the trust. So it's like little mini bank accounts within the trust. So, and they generally go class A, class B, and on down. So we did a forensic examination of my note. And so there it was in a Citibank run trust, and it was in class A, $225,000. And then when you look down in class B, there's my note again, like a brand new, different note, $225,000, class C, class D, on down 17 times. So we tracked my one note, sold off in these, however they sell them on the big global trading markets. And so 17 different times, though, like it was a different entity on each one. So now holding that trust like that, and everybody else's note is in there 10 to 20 times, that's all on deposit. So they're lending based on this REMIC, this real estate conduit. They lend the 10 times that. So now it's 17 times. So if there's $100,000 note in there, it's 1.7 million now times 10. So just
Amway
on one
doesn't
note.
hold a candle.
You can go back and look on YouTube and see Ron Paul. This is going back when Bernanke was the head of the Fed. And Ron Paul is saying exactly this to Bernanke. He's telling him, he goes, like, you guys are just creating money out of thin air constantly. He goes, we want to audit you, and Bernanke's just kind of chuckling at him and laughing at him. And Ron Paul really goes down through this pretty well. He's going, how is it that you're able to just create all this money out of thin air? And Bernanke tells him, well, it's all guaranteed by the members of the Fed. It's all guaranteed. He goes, well, what do you mean it's all guaranteed? Like, what right does that give you to just create money out of thin air and lend it? He's like, well, if there's ever a problem, we guarantee it. That's why we keep a reserve. But even the reserves are fake,
The
essentially.
remarkable arrogance.
Yeah. So as I dug into that and found out the nature of this thing, then we found out the one of the best ways to attack it at that time was a chain of title. So I looked, and I could not find with this trust that my note was in, I couldn't find any connection between that and Chase Bank that was foreclosing on me. So our little group, we had some attorneys involved that were coaching us sometimes on calls like this, essentially. And we would do some mock trials, and so that we could be prepared to go in and fight these things on our own. So I went down to the federal courthouse, and I filed a federal lawsuit against Chase Bank and Jamie Dimon, and I think whoever the mortgage company was originally that gave me the loan, quote unquote. And I filed it all for free because I was on a hardship. So I filed on a hardship, and the judge allowed it. And so that's how that started. And then yeah, I faced off with them in that court, which was quite an experience.
As I understand it, you waited them out and eventually won because they were unable to prove that they had the lawful jurisdiction over the home itself and over essentially your signature. Is that correct?
Right. Yep. So yeah. So it's so intimidating filing a pro per. I think I filed pro per on that one, but there's pro se and pro per. It's about the same thing. That just means that you are filing for yourself. You don't have an attorney representing you. So, and I think Chase Bank's attorneys, and actually Jamie Dimon's attorney was there in the courtroom. And so I think that they thought that they were just going to roll right over me, but I had been coached. And the first thing the judge told me, and we're talking about federal court, so the judge is sitting way up on this thing, looking down on you, and then really attempting to be intimidating to you. And so the first thing he told me was, Mr. Capra, I've read through your argument, and it looks like you're just attempting to get a free house. And so my response was, look, if in fact I owe somebody, we haven't established that, Your Honor, but if I do owe somebody, wouldn't it be reasonable to find out who that party is? As far as I can tell, Chase doesn't have any skin in the game here. Like, they're not even connected to my chain of title. All of a sudden so of course the first thing they do is present the mortgage documents that I signed. And so Chase's attorney says, look, Mr. Capra signed these documents. He agreed to all of this. And we're in possession of this, and blah, blah, blah. So they show me the documents, show Mr. Capra the documents. And the judge asked me, is that your name? Or is that your signature? And so I looked at it. Of course, I've been coached, and I tell him, no, that's not my signature, Your Honor. That's a photocopy. That is not my signature. That is a copy of my signature, but that is not my signature. So then the bank retorted back with, well, yeah, but there's a stamp on there that says this is a certified copy. So it's been certified by Jane Doe. And so I said, okay, Your Honor, let's call Jane Doe as a witness. I'd like to call her. I'd like to subpoena her to come in here so that I can cross-examine her about her knowledge of this document and creating a certified document. So I think that was the beginning of the first of many, delays in this case, because then the judge said, well, you're going to have to come up with better information, than that. So then as we went on, every time I came in, then I was coached to just object to everything that counsel for the bank had to say. So as soon as they'd start talking about my account, I would just object and tell them that's hearsay, Your Honor. Counsel has no firsthand knowledge of my mortgage loan. And so it was sustained every time. So basically they couldn't even talk. And then I had a whole list of documents I needed them to produce. And then the judge would go back and tell them to produce it. And they never could. Over a period of 7 years, we dragged this thing out.
And it's worth highlighting that this is against the attorneys of J.P. Morgan Chase.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, they just had that's why, early on in this process, I had a couple of collection agencies coming after me because I had big credit card debt. We had when the market crashed, we had a bunch of personal debt from a deal that had gone south, and I had a ton of credit card debt that I couldn't pay. And so what I learned from all of this, I was able to easily go in and squash collection agencies because they have literally zero standing. So it made this mortgage thing, made the collection on credit card debt seem like nothing. I mean, that's a piece of cake. If you have, even right now, if you have a collection agency coming after you, it's so easy to squash that and get them knocked out because they're not a damaged party. Our court is about damages. So a collection agency cannot buy your debt and then go around and try to force you to pay it in court, try to sue you over something that they're not damaged by. And the court will throw them out, right? So almost everybody that goes against, when a collection agency goes to court, because 9 times out of 10, they get a default judgment. So if you file an answer, most of the time you'll win. Most of the time you'll win. It's just a matter of actually answering because they don't expect that.
Absolutely powerful.
Yeah. So the long and short of the mortgage thing is that eventually, and so my good friend in Las Vegas that also at the same time was fighting for his house. And this is a mansion. It's a $1 million plus mansion. He started fighting for it back then, and he is still, so this was from 2008. He still doesn't pay a mortgage on it. And he's gone through all the court system through he went through the Court of Appeals and everything. And what they did was set him into mediation. And so every so many months, he has to go back to mediation, and he just slaughters them every time because they keep trying to make up fake documents that don't exist and bringing that to the mediation. And then he calls them out, and they figure out that the documents that they're trying to bring forward aren't real. And so he's had that house it's a beautiful house. I mean, it's like 8,000 square foot home, and there's 1,000 square foot casita and a swimming pool. And he's had that since 2008. No mortgage payments to the bank. No one's ever been able to. He's also the friend I had mentioned to you when we talked a long time ago. He had a car leased, and through some of this information that we learned right here and some of the things we filed, he essentially paid it off, we believe, through his treasury account. We turned in some documents, and they sent somebody over one time to attempt to take the car back, and then they couldn't find the car, see the car, or whatever, and they left. And no one, he still has that car, and that was years ago.
Fundamentally, as you're telling me these things, I'm realizing in a bit of an awestruck fashion, but a very pleasant way, that it all comes back to jurisdiction and the right of the human being to be responsible for the extension, essentially, of what is one's own vitality, what is one's own contribution in a value sense to society and to the world around us. And that's why I think service is such an important orientation to have from a spiritual lens as we go through this awakening process. But I want to come over here, if I may, and share something that you have sent over titled Affidavit of Tax Exempt Foreign Status, because this sort of speaks to this jurisdictional issue that seems to be the one sounding board, the one impenetrable membrane that they cannot get through. So do you mind to take us through what this is, Pastor Nick, and tell us why it was significant back then and why it may not actually be significant or necessary in the current day and time?
Right. So because the fact that there's this commercial side and this private side running concurrently, and 99% of the people don't understand that there is this private side, this affidavit really kind of breaks it down. Let's see. Yeah, so it even talks about on the top here, to first of all define the United States and U.S. in the federal legislative democracy of the District of Columbia. Okay, and Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, Guam. That's why none of these territories are states. Which entity has its origin in the jurisdiction? So we start getting into the jurisdiction of the actual United States of America, as opposed to the U.S. or the United States. So it goes down and lists. So what I'm telling them essentially is, number one, here's the difference between the two. I never knowingly got involved with this thing that you guys are doing over here, because I am a human being, a sentient being that got dragged into this through none of my own intention. I was actually, basically, I'm saying you've kind of fraudulently dragged me into this system, and I'm telling you right here and right now, I'm not a part of that system. I'm not born into that system. I am this. So I am no longer acquiescing to this system that you brought upon me through none of my own desire or doing.
I am therefore,
And
as described in 26 Code of Federal Regulations 1.871-2 and 26 U.S. Code 7701, Section B, a non-resident alien with respect
yeah,
to the United States, meaning the corporation,
yeah,
and am outside the general venue and jurisdiction of the U.S. This is bullet point number 8 for those out there that are following along. And then continuing down here, I am not and have never been, as described in 31 U.S. Code 3713, a fiduciary, or as described in 26 U.S. Code 6901, a transferee or a transferee of a transferee. Continuing down here, non-resident alien, I have no self-employment income as described in 26 Code of Federal Regulations. So this is a template essentially to extricate oneself from the
yeah.
jurisdiction of the corporation. Is that, am I over the line in saying
Yep.
that?
No, no, yeah. But when you use this template, you want to become familiar with it and, understand what it is it's a template for. You want to really read through it, and it can be a little bit tough, for some people to digest, and it might help you to read through it over and over again. On the very top of that document, let me see here.
Just for the audience out there, this is not legal advice, and we are not advising that you
No,
utilize the information on
no,
the screen to make legal decisions.
right.
It is, however, very fascinating and educational.
Educational purposes only. If you have a good constitutional attorney to guide you and assist you, then I would recommend you speak to that attorney you know, before attempting to file any kind of legal document. But it does, in the definitions on the very top of this, it does say, yeah, the terms United States and US are not to be construed to mean or include the sovereign United 50 States of America.
Incredible. So if I may, Mr. Capra, continuing forward from that point, that is clearly a movement of a very personal and intimate nature. What has been your journey since this process and since this, eventual conclusion of the standoff that occurred between you and the corporation, and where do we stand now?
Well, it's interesting. So this had led me into, filing some other documents, which um, I think would be really, really chancy to do right now. In fact, it might even be kind of hard. One of the documents that was involved in this package is also my UCC financing statement, which is kind of key to filing this with the IRS because um, it so that's where I took back the straw man corporate. This is where I went through and I filed a financing statement proclaiming myself as a creditor to my straw man. And I mean, I can do that because the straw man was based on me, and I'm a party of interest, obviously, because I'm walking in the shoes of the corporation that was created from me, the sentient being. Um, so when I take all that over, I also reclaim the treasury account that is mine and pay off any debts that are attributed to that straw man by virtue of my treasury account. So that's kind of the thing where you have to know how to direct the treasury to go ahead and release those funds to take care of any of the debts that have been incurred by the straw man. And right now, like I filed my UCC3, which is the financing statement. So I claimed everything. I claimed everything that the straw man owned. And I claimed it as me being the debtor and the straw man being, and the straw man being my creditor, or he's the debtor, I'm the creditor. In fact, I think that's on the UCC.
Fascinating.
part of this. But so that was key because that's the first thing where I'm in control of that straw man. So when I go in and I make statements about the straw man, or I'm saying that I'm separate, although, with that affidavit, I don't know that you would have to specifically have that UCC financing statement, but I think it just gives it more teeth. And again, like I said, it might be really difficult. I filed that in the state of Washington, and I don't know. Washington eventually stopped people from doing that. And I think, they only allow like large corporations that are, part of the whole machine to kind of file statements like that anymore. Then I took that filing and I put it on the public record in several states as well, just to make sure it's on the public record. And so it stands. It's been on the public record so many years that, according to the UCC code and the United States code, for the amount of years I've had that on the public record uncontested, it should stand.
Absolutely remarkable. You know, I would be remiss if I didn't ask about the spiritual side of this entire journey that you've described. This sounds like a life-altering experience, certainly a very high gravity experience that, produced a tremendous amount of learning, a tremendous amount of wisdom, and some very, very cool information to share with my audience, I think, at such a time as this. But you're also a pastor. How has this, galvanized or, cemented your relationship with God?
Well, I mean, it's totally cemented it. I've been involved in the ministry for most of my life, and my mom was an evangelist, and then I did some street evangelism when I was younger on the Las Vegas Strip. There were some of the I knew a lot of the lounge acts over there on the Strip, and I ministered to a lot of those a lot of those people over there. And so I've been involved in the ministry, and as we started going through this, I mean, there was so much prayer involved when we first started to go into default on credit card debt, and then when the foreclosure started happening and the phone started ringing off the hook. Those first times, man, it made me nervous, and so there was a lot of prayer involved with that. And as the Holy Spirit kind of brought me comfort that, look, these are just some things. Don't worry about this stuff. Trust me. One thing that I can guarantee you that the Holy Spirit is always saying to you is trust me. And I get people telling me all the time, man, I wish I could hear the voice of the Spirit. And the only reason that you can't is because you're blocking it out. He's always talking to you. And, the best way that you can hear it is to, one, really immerse yourself in the Word. Like, not only read the Bible to yourself, but read a lot of passages out loud. I mean, that's what it's the voicing it and the speaking it with your lips out loud that really activates the supernatural part of it. It's God's word is alive, and Jesus Christ is that living word. I mean, we know from the first part of John, Jesus Christ is the living word of God, and without that living word, nothing was created. And then that word became one with us. He became first the Son of Man, and now sits on the throne as the Son of God. When he returns, it's the Son of God. So that word, speaking it out and getting familiar with it, will help you to hear the Spirit speaking to you, because the Spirit is always speaking to you. And the number one thing he's saying is trust me. And I could always hear him telling me that. I mean, he would just clearly tell me, you're going to have to just let go and trust me here. So that's what I did. He brought the right people in, the right circumstances. And even when things seemed like they were bleak, I just hung in there with it and trusted. And if those bleak things hadn't happened, it wouldn't have brought me into the next level that really just exploded me to another level, to where, you know, so here I was in all that debt and with the house in foreclosure. And all of that started at the beginning of Shemitah. So anybody in our audience, a lot of Christians should be familiar with Shemitah. Is the 7-year periods according to the Jewish calendar, where debts are forgiven. And I'm every year, every time it's the year of the Shemitah, right on that 7th year, some life-changing thing has happened for my wife and I. But God has, he removed all that credit card debt, just disappeared. The house thing, so it started at the beginning of a Shemitah, and then 7 years later, exactly on the year of the Shemitah, the bank just wanted to just go ahead and pay us to leave. Like they just wanted to settle, and then nobody, there was no harm, no foul. We'll just settle. I had to give them the house back, but that was fine. I had lived in it for 7 years, mortgage free. Plus I had a rental property, mortgage free, and I was renting it out the whole time. And then for them to pay me at the end of it, and I had already moved to Colorado, so I had already abandoned the house. It needed a lot of work. I didn't want to put work into it because the house still was not worth a lot. And then God just kind of, when I go through these things, and the Holy Spirit just tells me, see, look, now look back. Things seem, it's kind of like the stock market. It goes up, and then it'll take a dive, and then it'll go up, and it generally keeps going up. And that's kind of how it is with you. I mean, you have to keep that faith in there, because God, it's kind of a test in a way. Can you wait on me? Can you hang in there? Do you trust me? And it's because of this little thing that I'm able to take you up to that next level. And even today,
Remarkable.
I mean, where it's taken us from that time, now that's going back to 2008 when I first went into foreclosure, all the way to where we're at now. And, it's like, I mean, it's been remarkable. He's led us to the right place at the right time, met the right people. Some of the wrong people go away. Don't hold on to people that you shouldn't hold on to. And the right people will come in, as long as you hang in there and just trust and surrender to it.
I will pour out blessings that which you will not be able to receive, not have room enough to receive, if I'm not mistaken on the passage. Pastor Nick, this has been one of the coolest conversations that we've had on the audio chat series. I'm running up against the time here, but I want to thank you very much for coming on. It's been a true pleasure.
Awesome. Yeah, well, maybe we'll get together again and go down some other roads and bring some other documents into it.
Always up for the discussion. God bless you, sir. For the audience out
Hey,
there, I hope you very much enjoyed the conversation. I'll be back with each of you again soon on the Q News
God
Patriot.
bless you. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.